In order to start, we want to make sure that we have two collections, one for the reference and one for the geo. We also want to make sure that we select the ref collection as the active collection. Then we are going to press Shift A, add mesh plane, and that will be our dimension guide. So we'll set it to 175. And the location we will set at 70, as that will pretty much be the height of the tabletop. We also want to press Tab to go into edit mode, A to make sure we select everything, E to extrude, and then 3 to extrude it by 3 centimeters and give it some thickness. That way it will be easier to see when we press 1 on the numpad and go into front view. Tab again to go into object mode, F2 to rename the object, and we can call it ref geo. This is just the dimension guide that we are going to have, and then we can press Shift A, add image background. Go into your reference folder and select the reference font. My images are in the description, or you can just get your own reference. So we start with the reference font, import that, GZ to drag it up on the Z-axis until it reaches the base. There we go. And the X-axis is slightly off center, so we're going to press G and X to drag it on this side as well. Make sure it is as centered as we can get it. Then if we press on the period key, we can change the pivot point from the median to the 3D cursor, S to scale, and we can drag the reference all the way down until it matches our cube. There we go. F2, rename that ref front. 3 on the numpad to go into side view, and then we can press Shift D to duplicate our reference. Right click to make sure that we don't move it, and then we want to rotate it. So RZ90. Now if we press 7 on the numpad and go into top view, we can press Alt Z to go into X-ray mode. Shift A, add image background. This time I am going to select the reference top. The same thing as the side images, we're just going to scale that down. Rename that ref top. And while we are here, we can rename the duplicate as ref side. Alt Z to cancel the X-ray mode. At this point, we can also delete the reference geo, X to delete. Make sure that the geo collection is the active one. And the last thing we want to do is press the period key again and set the pivot back to the median point. The first part we are going to model is the tabletop, so we can press Shift A, add mesh cylinder, and we want it to be 8-sided because we have 8 players around the table. We want to set the radius to 87.5, as that will give us the 175 centimeters dimension that our original dimension cube had. And we also want to set the location on the Z-axis to 70. And if we press 1 on the numpad to go into front view, we can see it lines up with our reference. So press 7 on the numpad to go into front view, Tab to go into edit mode, 1 to go into vertex selection, E to extrude, right click and then S to scale, and we want to scale it all the way up to that line. There we go, and then we want to extrude again, right click, S to scale one more time, then press Ctrl F and grid fill. We want the edges to line up with the axes, so we are going to change the offset to 1. And that is that. Wonderful. 1 on the numpad to go into the front view, A to select everything, E to extrude, and then -3. And then we have some thickness to our model. Now if we press 3 to go into face selection, we can select the center part, Ctrl+ to expand the selection, E to extrude 1.5. That way we can give it some depth, but not too much. Then we can press P to separate by selection, tab to go into edit mode, select that center part, GZ 0.5. That way we can bring it up a little bit more. The last thing we want to do is if we go to the bottom of the tabletop, press 2 to go into edge selection, Alt-Shift to select the edge loop, X, dissolve edges, and then press Ctrl-R, left-click, right-click to put that in place. And this way the edge loop is a bit more even. And that is it for the tabletop. The next part that we want to model is the armrest. So if we press 7 on the numpad to go into top view, we can select the centerpiece, the tabletop, and the reference image for the top, RZ22.5. And now we have a flat part on the bottom, which is exactly what we want. It will be easier to model that way. So we can just select the tabletop, tab to go into edit mode, 3 to go into face selection, select the face at the bottom, Shift D to duplicate, right click to make sure that we don't move it, P to separate by selection, tab to go back into object mode, select the new part, and if we press 1 on the numpad to go into front view, tab to go into edit mode again, A to make sure everything is selected, E to extrude, and -3. And again, that lines up with the reference we have. 7 on the numpad to go back to top view. At this point we can hide the tabletop. It's kind of getting in the way a little bit. If we press Alt-Z to go into X-ray mode, 1 to go into vertex selection, and select the vertices at the top, we can press G twice to slide it and make sure we are sliding it to the top of the armrest. Alt-Z to go back into the shaded mode, 3 to go to face selection, select the top face, Alt-Z again to go back into X-ray mode, and now we can scale that top face down to match with our reference. There we go. Now we can press Ctrl-R and 5, left click, right click to make sure we don't move any of those edge loops. We also want one in the middle here, so again Ctrl-R, left click, right click, Alt-Z to disable the X-ray mode, 3 to go into the face selection, select those 4 faces on the left side, I to insert, doesn't really matter by how much, then right click, and with the Loop Tools add-on we can select Circle. Alt-Z to go back into X-ray mode, and now we have to rotate, move and scale it to make sure that it fits with the reference. E to extrude again, S to scale a little bit, and now Alt-Z again to go back to the shaded view, E to extrude, and we are going to extrude straight down. Control plus twice to select that cylindrical area. Shift D to duplicate, right click to make sure that it stays in place, P to separate by selection, Tab to go back into object mode, select that new piece, and in the modifier tab, we can add a solidify modifier. Now that is very high, so we want to reduce that. We can put it at 0.2, and that is basically our cup holder. At this point, we can turn on the tabletop. The last thing we want to do here is duplicate the armrest and the cup holder all around the table, and we are going to do it with the array modifier. The first thing we want is to create an empty. So Shift A, empty plain access, F2 to rename that array control, rotate it on the z-axis 45 degrees, and hide it. Now we can select the armrest, go to the modifier tab and use the array modifier, set the count to 8 because the table has 8 sides, uncheck the relative offset. We don't need that. What we do want is to check the object offset, and in the menu we can select the array control. Doesn't look very great now, but if we press Ctrl A and apply all transforms, it is in the right place. We will do the same with the cup holder. Add modifier, array, set the count to 8, uncheck relative offset, check object offset, and select the array control as the object. Once again, Ctrl A, apply all transforms, and the array modifier is working as intended. The last part we are going to model is the legs of the table. So press 1 on the numpad to go into front view, Shift A, add mesh and a circle. We can set the vertices to 16, and the radius will be small, so maybe like 5. Tab to go into edit mode, 1 to go into vertex selection, A to make sure that everything is selected, and then while still in edit mode, we are going to move it to the side. G, X, and try to line it up with the leg until it is roughly in the middle. S to scale. Move it again if necessary. And scale a bit more. Now we are going to extrude that once to that point, once to that point, and then all the way up here. So E to extrude, Z to lock it on the Z axis, E to extrude again, Z to lock it on the Z axis, S to scale. And now we can extrude it all the way up, again, Z to lock it on the Z axis. And in the median point, we can set the Z axis to exactly 68. That will help us out here. E to extrude again, right click immediately so we don't move it. S to scale until it reaches the edges of the reference. E to extrude, right click, G, Z, 2. So we pull it up by exactly 2 centimeters, and that matches with the top of the table. Now if we press Z to go into wireframe view, Ctrl R, and this time we want 4 edge loops. So it matches on those corners. And in each of those sections we want 3 more edge loops. 1, 2, 3, right click, Control R, 1, 2, 3, left click, right click. Then Alt A to deselect everything, Alt Shift and left click to select the entire edge loop, Alt Shift click to select the bottom edge loop as well, and we'll do that for the bottom part too. After we selected all 4 of those edge loops, we can press S, Shift Z to not scale it on the Z axis, and we just want to scale it in. Z again to go back to the solid view. Numpad slash to go into isolation mode or local view. Alt A to deselect the edge loops. And we want to select this top edge loop to close it. Alt Shift left click, Control F, Grid Fill. Now again, we want it to line up with the axes, the Y and the X axes. So we need to play with the offset a little bit. There we go. And we'll do the same at the bottom. Alt A to deselect the faces at the top. Alt Shift left click to select the edge loop at the bottom. Control F, Grid Fill. Play with the offset again until it matches up. Numpad slash to exit the local view. Now we can press tab to go back into object mode, 1 on the numpad to go into the front view, and here we want to add a modifier, so it will be the mirror modifier this time, and it works very well on the front view, but if we press 3 on the numpad to go into the side view, it is still very much in the middle. So we can press tab again to go back into edit mode, A to select everything, and just drag it on the Y axis, so G and Y, until it matches with the reference. Now we can add the Y axis to the mirror modifier, and in the 3D view, we have the 4 legs of the table. Now it is time to do some cleanup, and we are going to start by deleting the reference collection and everything in it. Next we are going to rotate the legs just like we rotated the table. RZ22.5. There we go. Then if we go into the overlay tab, we can check face orientation, and pretty much everything but the cup holders need to be recalculated. So we can just drag and click to select everything. Tab to go into edit mode. A to make sure that everything is selected. Shift N to recalculate the normals, and now everything is blue. Alt A to deselect everything. Tab to go back to object mode. And in the overlay tab we can uncheck face orientation. After that, we want to check that the scale of the model is at 1, so we'll go over the center part, the tabletop, the armrest, the cup holder and the legs. The scale is all at 1, which is great. The last thing we want to do is add a few more edge loops for consistency. So if we click and drag to select everything, tab to go into edit mode, Alt A to make sure we don't have anything selected, and we are mainly just going to add edge loops for the center part and the tabletop. So we're going to press Ctrl R, left click, right click, just to make sure we have a few more edges in the middle. We'll do the same to the tabletop. Ctrl R, left click, right click. We'll do that on all the sides of the model. And we can also add an edge loop in the middle here. So 3 more edges. And now it has a little bit of a better consistency. The last thing we want to do in this section is some beveling and smoothing. We are going to start by pressing Tab to go back to object mode, select only the legs, isolate them by pressing numpad/, go back to edit mode by pressing Tab again, and we want to select the edge loops at the top and the bottom. So Alt-Shift left click, and make sure we select all the edges. There we go, that is the top. Now we'll do the same at the bottom. Alt-Shift left click, make sure that everything is selected and we are not missing any edges. Then we can press Ctrl B and left click. And in the bevel panel we want to change the segment from 1 to 2. And then the width should be 0.25. We want to keep it small and have a somewhat sharp edge. Then if we press Alt-A to deselect everything, now we can do the same with the middle edges, but we'll have them a bit softer. So Alt-Shift left click and select all those middle edges at the bottom and at the top of the model. We'll do the same, Ctrl B and left click, but this time we want the bevel to be softer, so we'll set it to 0.5. Tab to go into object mode, right click, shade smooth, and that is the legs. Numpad/ to go out of the local view, select the tabletop and we'll do pretty much the same. Isolate it, Tab to go into edit mode, and we want to select all those edge loops on the outside, and we also want the edge loop here on the inside and the corner edges that we are going to have. Ctrl B, left click, 0.25, Tab to go back to object mode, right click, shade smooth. Numpad/ to leave the local mode, select the center of the tabletop, Tab to go into edit mode, and we'll do the same, select the inside edge loop, and then select all the corner edges that we want to keep sharp. Ctrl B, 0.25, we want it to be the same as the tabletop, and that way they will match. Now we want to do it for the armrest. We can hide the array modifier to make it a little bit easier. Pressing on the numpad/ to isolate it, Tab to go into edit mode, and again we want all the edges of the model, all the outside edges, the frame of it. We want to select all of them and mark them to make sure that we are not missing anything. There we go. And we want it again to be quite soft. So if we press Ctrl B and left click, we can set it to 0.75. And the cup holder area, we do want it to be sharp. So if we select that, Ctrl B, left click, we can set it to 0.25. Tab to go into object mode, right click, shade smooth. Exit local view. Activate the array modifier again. And now we have it all across the table with a little gap, which is quite nice. The last part we want is the cup holder, and for that we first need to apply the solidify modifier. So with the mouse over the modifier, we can press Ctrl A to apply it. Again, we'll hide the array modifier to make it a little bit easier. Numpad/ to go into the local view or isolation mode. Tab to go into edit mode. 3 to go into face selection, and we want to select the faces at the bottom. Then Ctrl+ to expand the selection and delete that. So X and delete faces. We are not going to see them. They are not going to affect the geometry or the texture, so there is no need to keep them. Press 2 to go back into edge selection, Alt-Shift left click to select all the edge loops that we want in here. Make sure we are not missing anything. Ctrl-B, left click, and this one is quite a small part, so we want it to be a very small bevel, so maybe 0.05. That looks pretty good. Tab to go into object mode, right click, shade smooth, numpad / to exit local view, activate the array modifier, and that is the modeling part complete.